At my best friend's wedding, my name tag said janitor, so I left and did this. The cream-colored envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I finally worked up the courage to open it. The elegant gold lettering spelled out my name, Morgan Taylor, in perfect calligraphy. Inside was an invitation to Clara Whitmore's wedding, my childhood best friend, my sister in all ways but blood, and recently, a stranger I barely recognized. I traced my finger over the embossed letters. June 15th. The Plaza Hotel. Black tie optional. Our friendship had changed over the years, slowly at first, then all at once. We'd grown up on the same street in our small Connecticut town, sharing secrets and dreams under the massive oak tree that separated our backyards. Clara was always the ambitious one, the girl with perfectly ironed clothes and a 5-year plan by age 12. I was more laid back, creative, content to follow where life led me. For 20 years, it worked, until it didn't. The shift began when Clara landed her dream job at that prestigious marketing firm in New York. Suddenly, our weekly phone calls became monthly, then quarterly. Her stories changed, no longer about shared memories, but about networking events, exclusive parties, and the important people she now knew. Morgan, she had squealed during one of our rare lunch dates last year. You'll never guess who I met at the charity gala. James Richardson, the tech billionaire. He's investing in Nathan's startup. Nathan was her then fiancé, now soon-to-be husband. Handsome, wealthy, and according to Clara, utterly perfect. I'd met him exactly twice, and both times he'd spent the evening on his phone, barely acknowledging my existence. That's great, I had said, pushing my salad around. My art gallery showcase went well too. I sold 3 pieces on opening night. Clara's smile hadn't reached her eyes. Oh, how cute. It's so nice you're still doing that little hobby of yours. Little hobby. My career. My passion. My livelihood. I stared at the invitation again. Despite everything, a part of me still cared for Clara. Maybe attending her wedding would help bridge the growing gap between us. Maybe the old Clara was still in there somewhere. So I RSVP'd yes, bought a new dress I couldn't really afford, and marked the date on my calendar. The day of the wedding arrived with perfect weather. I took extra care getting ready, curling my hair and applying makeup with precision. My dress, a floor-length burgundy gown, made me feel confident, beautiful even. I wrapped Clara's gift, a handmade painting of the oak tree from our childhood, and headed to the plaza. The hotel was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and fresh flowers adorned every surface. Guests in designer suits and dresses mingled in the lobby, champagne flutes in hand. I pushed down a flutter of insecurity. I belonged here as much as anyone. At the entrance to the grand ballroom, a table was set up with escort cards. A young woman in a black dress smiled professionally as I approached. Name, please? Morgan Taylor. She scanned the alphabetized cards, pulling one from the T section. Here you are, Miss Taylor. Table 32. I thanked her and took the card, glancing at it as I walked away. Then I stopped, certain I'd misread. The card listed my name correctly, but underneath, where it should have indicated my table number, was a single word. Janitor. I flipped the card over, thinking it must be a mistake. The back was blank. Excuse me, I said, returning to the table. I think there's been a mix-up with my card. The woman frowned, examining it. Her eyes widened slightly before her professional demeanor returned. Let me check the master list. She flipped through a binder, her finger running down a page of names. I'm so sorry, but that's what's listed here. Table 32, designation janitor. My stomach dropped. Designation? I don't understand. I'm not sure either, she admitted. All the other guests just have table numbers. A burst of familiar laughter interrupted us. I turned to see Clara, radiant in her wedding gown, surrounded by her bridesmaids near the ballroom entrance. She hadn't noticed me yet, but as I watched, she leaned in to whisper something to her maid of honor, who glanced in my direction and snickered. In that moment, I knew. This wasn't a mistake. I approached slowly, card in hand, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. Clara's eyes met mine, and for a split second, I caught something there, not warmth or friendship, but something cold and satisfied. "Morgan, you came," she exclaimed, her greeting lacking genuine enthusiasm. "Love the dress. Marshall's?" It was Nordstrom, on sale, but I didn't correct her. "Clara, can we talk for a minute? Privately?" Her bridesmaids exchanged glances. Clara sighed dramatically. "I'm a bit busy, getting married and all." "What's up?" I held up the escort card. "What is this? Why does my card say janitor?" The bridesmaids erupted into poorly concealed giggles. Clara's painted lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, that," she said, waving dismissively. "Just a little inside joke. Don't be so sensitive." "Inside joke? I don't get it." She rolled her eyes. "Remember in high school when you had to clean the art room for a week as punishment for that paint incident? We used to call you the janitor." I stared at her in disbelief. "That was 15 years ago, Clara. And no one called me that." "Well, we did behind your back," she replied with a shrug. "Honestly, Morgan, it's just a bit of fun. Your table is with the distant relatives and Nathan's work acquaintances. It's not like I could put you with my close friends." Each word hit like a physical blow. The Clara I knew, the girl who had held my hand at my mother's funeral, who had cheered the loudest at my first art show, was gone. Or maybe she had never existed at all. "I see," I said quietly, as the truth crystallized painfully in my mind. I wasn't here as a valued friend. I was here to be humiliated. Clara checked her diamond-encrusted watch. "I need to get back to the bridal suite. Ceremony starts in 30. Don't forget to sign the guest book." And then she was gone, trailing silk and laughter, leaving me standing alone with my worthless escort card and the sudden, devastating realization that 20 years of friendship had meant nothing to her. The wedding planner approached, apology written all over her face. "Miss Taylor, I can find you another seat." "No," I interrupted, my decision already made. "Thank you, but I won't be staying." I placed the escort card back on the table, turned around, and walked out of the Plaza Hotel, leaving Clara's gift behind. Some bridges, once burned, aren't worth rebuilding, and some betrayals can never be forgiven. The June evening air hit my face as I stepped out of the plaza, my heels clicking against the pavement in an angry rhythm. Tourists milled about, taking photos of the famous hotel, oblivious to my quiet devastation. I hailed a cab, climbed in, and gave the driver my address before the tears could fall. "Change of plans?" he asked, eyeing my formal attire in the rearview mirror. "You could say that," I replied, turning to watch the hotel shrink in the distance. Inside my apartment, I kicked off my heels, unzipped the expensive dress, and let it pool at my feet. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, carefully removing the makeup I'd applied with such hope hours earlier. As I wiped away the last traces of mascara, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not just for tonight's humiliation, but for years of subtle degradation I'd willfully ignored. Clara's backhanded compliments, her dismissive attitude toward my art, the way she'd slowly frozen me out of her elevated social circle. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe, one of our mutual friends from college, at Clara's wedding. "Where are you? Your table is missing a place setting." So they'd already removed any evidence of my planned attendance. Perfect. I didn't respond. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped onto my small balcony overlooking the city. Below, New York continued its relentless pace, indifferent to my small heartbreak. Another text. "Morgan, are you okay?" This one from Daniel, Clara's cousin, who'd always been kind to me. I hesitated before typing back. "Not coming. Ask Clara about my designation if you want the full story." I switched my phone to silent and set it face down on the table. Tonight was for processing, not explanations. The morning after the wedding, I awoke to 7 missed calls and a dozen texts. News traveled fast. Some expressed outrage on my behalf. Others demanded explanations. One from Clara herself. "Way to make a scene by not showing up. Very mature." I deleted it without responding. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into my work. Art had always been my refuge, and now I needed it more than ever. I started a new series, abstract pieces exploring betrayal and rebirth. Dark colors giving way to unexpected light. Broken lines reforming into stronger patterns. My gallery owner, Elise, was intrigued by the shift in my style. "There's something different here," she said, studying a particularly intense canvas. "Something raw." What triggered this? I hesitated, then told her the story of the wedding and the janitor card. Her expression darkened with each word. "That's not a friend," she said simply when I finished. "That's an emotional vampire who kept you around to feel superior." 20 years, I replied, shaking my head. "How did I miss it?" "Because good people don't look for cruelty in those they love," she said, squeezing my shoulder. "But listen, this new work is powerful. I want to feature it in next month's showcase." That showcase changed everything. A prominent critic attended, wrote a glowing review of my evocative exploration of social hierarchies and personal renaissance. 3 pieces sold on opening night to a collector known for launching artists' careers. By the end of the month, I had commissions lined up and inquiries from 2 other galleries wanting to feature my work. I was gaining momentum just as Clara's carefully curated social media posts began hinting at trouble. Fewer glamorous outings, more cryptic quotes about weathering storms and true strength. The gossip trickled in through mutual acquaintances. Nathan's startup was struggling. Investors were pulling out. Their lavish lifestyle was built on promises that weren't materializing. I felt no satisfaction in their difficulties, only a strange sense of detachment. Their problems seemed so distant from my world of canvases and creation. Then came the newspaper article. A small piece in the business section about Nathan's company being acquired by a larger tech firm, Horizon Innovations. The acquisition had saved them from bankruptcy, but at a cost. Nathan was no longer CEO, merely a minor executive in the company he'd founded. I might have missed it entirely if not for the name of Horizon's founder and CEO, James Richardson, the tech billionaire Clara had once bragged about meeting. The same man who had initially invested in Nathan's vision. It was a small world after all. 6 months after Clara's wedding, my world had transformed. My art series on betrayal and rebirth, now titled Janitor's Closet, a private joke that still made me smile, had catapulted me from local artist to rising star. The New York Times style section had featured me in a profile. 3 galleries across the country now displayed my work. And my bank account, for the first time in my life, had more than just enough to get by. I'd moved out of my cramped apartment into a spacious loft in Soho with high ceilings perfect for my larger canvases. The floor-to-ceiling windows let in natural light that changed throughout the day, inspiring new color palettes and techniques. It was everything I dreamed of during those years of struggling to be taken seriously. The irony wasn't lost on me. Clara's cruelty had sparked the creative evolution that launched my career. Her attempt to humiliate me had instead liberated me. I rarely thought about her these days, focused instead on my upcoming international show in Paris. But fate had other plans for our intertwined stories. "Are you seeing this?" Elise texted one morning, followed by a link to a business article. I clicked it open, coffee mug paused halfway to my lips. Tech darling Novatech faces bankruptcy amid fraud allegations. The headline blared. Nathan's company, Clara's husband's pride and joy, was imploding spectacularly. According to the article, Nathan had misrepresented user growth figures to investors. When the truth came to light, their stock plummeted overnight. James Richardson, once their biggest champion, had withdrawn all support and was reportedly furious at being misled. I scrolled through the article, learning that the once golden couple was now facing not just financial ruin, but potential legal consequences. Their Hamptons house had been listed for sale. Their social media accounts had gone dark. Karma. Elise texted again. "You seeing this? The universe, working its magic." I wasn't sure what I felt. Not glee, certainly. Not pity either. Perhaps a distant academic interest in how quickly fortunes could change. I was about to set my phone down when it rang. An unknown number. "Morgan Taylor," I answered. Miss Taylor? James Richardson calling. My breath caught. The James Richardson, tech billionaire, investor, and apparently the man who had pulled the rug out from under Nathan's company. Mr. Richardson, I replied, keeping my voice calm. What can I do for you? Please call me James, he said. I was at the Garrison Gallery last week and saw your work. Reflections in Broken Glass particularly moved me. One of my most personal pieces from the Janitor's Closet series, a fractured mirror effect showing distorted versions of the same figure. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. I've recently acquired a building in Manhattan that I'm converting into a tech incubator, he continued. The lobby needs something impactful. I'd like to commission a large-scale piece from you. The commission fee he named made me grip the edge of my counter for support. I'd be honored, I managed. Excellent. My assistant will email you the details. Perhaps we could meet next week to discuss the vision over dinner? We set a date, and I hung up, staring at my phone in disbelief. This wasn't just any commission, it was career-defining. The kind that established artists dreamed about. That evening, as I sketched preliminary ideas for the Richardson Commission, a notification popped up on my laptop. An email from a real estate agency, one of those automated alerts I'd set up when idly browsing properties far out of my price range months ago. Price reduction on 543 West Broadway, Penthouse B. I clicked through out of curiosity, and my coffee nearly spilled across my keyboard. It was Clara and Nathan's apartment, the one she'd shown off in countless Instagram posts. The place she'd once invited me to just to see it, only to spend the entire visit pointing out features I could probably never afford on an artist's salary. Now it was being offloaded in what was clearly a distress sale. The latest reduction brought it almost within the range of what I could now afford, especially with the Richardson Commission. I closed the listing, trying to dismiss the wild thought that had flashed through my mind. It would be absurd, petty even. But the idea lingered. Later that week, I met James for dinner at an exclusive restaurant overlooking Central Park. He was surprisingly down-to-earth for someone with his wealth and influence, genuinely passionate about art and technology in equal measure. I have to confess, he said over dessert, I knew who you were before I saw your work. I raised an eyebrow. How so? I briefly invested in a company called Novatech. The founder's wife mentioned you once at a dinner party. Not kindly, I'm afraid. A cold ripple ran through me. Clara. He nodded. She was dismissive of your work. Called it a little hobby. I remember finding it strange, the way she seemed determined to diminish you. We have history, I said simply. Well, her assessment couldn't have been more wrong. Your talent is extraordinary. He paused, swirling his wine. It's why I'm also considering you for another opportunity. Another commission? No, a board position. I'm establishing a foundation to support emerging artists. We need someone with both artistic credibility and business acumen. Your gallery owner speaks highly of your business sense. I nearly laughed at the cosmic joke of it all. Clara had spent years belittling my career choice, and now her husband's former investor was offering me not just money, but influence in the art world. I need to know more details, I said carefully, but I'm definitely interested. As we finished dinner, James mentioned casually, by the way, I just acquired a controlling interest in Horizon Media. Know it. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. Clara's company. He nodded. Restructuring begins next month. The perfect opportunity had arrived, wrapped in karmic justice, delivered to my doorstep without my having to lift a finger. The Richardson Commission consumed my next 2 months. I created a massive triptych for his tech incubator, a piece about innovation, destruction, and rebirth that subtly incorporated elements of binary code and circuit patterns. The installation was covered by major art publications, further cementing my rising status in the art world. At the unveiling reception, I wore a designer dress I hadn't had to save for, sipped champagne, and chatted easily with Silicon Valley executives and gallery owners who now knew my name. 3 years ago, I wouldn't have been invited to such an event. 6 months ago, I would have felt like an imposter. Now I belonged. Morgan. James approached with a woman I recognized as the editor of Art Forum. Spectacular work. Everyone's talking about it. I smiled, accepting compliments with newfound grace. This was my world now, earned through talent, hard work, and perhaps a touch of serendipitous revenge. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned, my phone buzzed with a notification. A LinkedIn request from Clara Whitmore Bennett. I nearly laughed out loud. After months of social media silence, this was her first digital reappearance, attempting to connect professionally with a friend she'd humiliated. I ignored it and slipped my phone back into my clutch. 3 days later, an email arrived. "Morgan, hope this finds you well. I've been seeing your name everywhere lately. So proud of what you've accomplished with your art. We should catch up sometime. It's been too long. Warmly, Clara." No mention of the wedding. No acknowledgement of her behavior. No apology. I didn't respond. A week passed. Then another LinkedIn notification. Clara had endorsed me for creative direction and fine arts. The digital equivalent of throwing pebbles at my window. Again, I ignored her. Then came the voicemail. "Morgan, hi. It's Clara. I've been trying to reach you. Listen, I'm in your neighborhood tomorrow and thought maybe we could grab coffee. Call me back." Her voice had that familiar fake cheerful tone she used when wanting something. I deleted the message without returning the call. The direct approach having failed, Clara tried another angle. She messaged Elise at the gallery, inquiring about commissioning a piece from me as a surprise gift. Elise, well aware of our history, forwarded me the email with a single question mark. I replied, "Tell her my commissions are booked for the next 18 months. It was true. My calendar was filled with prestigious projects, gallery shows, and speaking engagements. I had no time or energy for Clara's sudden interest in my work, especially when that interest surely masked an ulterior motive. But Clara was nothing if not persistent. On a rainy Tuesday, as I supervised the installation of new pieces at my Soho gallery, the bell above the entrance chimed. And there she stood, Clara Whitmore Bennett, soaked from the rain, her designer coat noticeably less luxurious than those she'd flaunted in the past. Her hair lacked its usual perfect blowout, and her smile seemed strained around the edges. "Morgan," she exclaimed, as if we'd arranged this meeting. "Finally caught you." I maintained a neutral expression. "Clara, this is unexpected." I know. I was just passing by and saw your name on the window. Can you believe it? Such a coincidence." She glanced around at the sleek gallery space, taking in the reds indicating sold pieces, the elegant crowd of potential buyers. "This is incredible. You've really done well for yourself." "Thank you," I replied, my tone professional. "Did you need something specific?" "We're in the middle of an installation." Her smile flickered. "I thought maybe we could grab lunch? Catch up properly." "I'm busy today." "Tomorrow then? Or whenever works for you." The desperation in her voice was subtle, but unmistakable. I studied her, this woman who had once wielded her social status like a weapon against me. Now she stood in my gallery, practically begging for my attention. "Why now, Clara?" I asked quietly. "It's been over a year since your wedding. You haven't reached out once until recently." She shifted uncomfortably. "I've just been thinking about old friends. With everything happening lately, everything meaning Nathan's company collapsing?" The words were blunt, and her flinch confirmed my suspicion. "It's been a difficult time," she admitted, her voice dropping. "Nathan's under a lot of pressure, and with the restructuring at Horizon Media." There it was, the real reason. James Richardson's acquisition of her company had put her position in jeopardy. She needed connections, and suddenly, I was worth knowing again. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, not entirely dishonestly. Watching someone's life unravel wasn't as satisfying as I might once have imagined. But neither was I inclined to offer easy absolution. "We should talk properly," she pressed. "There's actually something specific I wanted to ask you about. A business matter." I checked my watch. "I have 10 minutes before my next appointment." Relief flooded her face. "Perfect. Is there somewhere private we could?" I led her to my office at the back of the gallery, a stark, minimalist space with a single one of my paintings on the wall. Ironically, it was the piece most directly inspired by her betrayal, a fractured name tag with illegible text, bleeding red into negative space. She sat across from me, her usual confidence now a paper-thin veneer. "You know James Richardson, don't you? I saw photos from your installation at his building." "I do. He's making changes at Horizon. Major restructuring." Her fingernails drummed nervously on her designer handbag, one I recognized from last season's collection. "I thought maybe you could put in a good word for me. Tell him how talented I am in marketing. We go way back, after all." And there it was, the request I'd been waiting for. Not friendship, not reconciliation, just Clara, using me once again. I leaned back in my chair, studying Clara's face. The desperation in her eyes was real, but so was the calculation. Even now, brought low by circumstance, she wasn't approaching me as a friend seeking forgiveness, but as a resource to be mined. "Let me understand," I said carefully. "You want me to recommend you to James Richardson? The same James Richardson who now controls your company?" She nodded eagerly. "Exactly. Just tell him what a fantastic marketing mind I am. How long we've known each other." She leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Between us, Nathan's situation has been challenging. We've had to make some adjustments. This job is really important right now." "Adjustments like selling your penthouse?" I asked mildly. Her eyes widened slightly. "You know about that? I keep up with the real estate market." I didn't mention I'd actually toured the property last week, considering it as a potential investment. A delicious irony I was still processing. "It's just temporary," she said quickly. "Nathan has several deals in the pipeline. Once this legal misunderstanding is cleared up." "Fraud charges aren't typically considered misunderstandings, Clara." She flinched but recovered quickly. "The media exaggerates everything. You know how it is." She waved her hand dismissively, the gesture reminiscent of how she dismissed my career for years. "Anyway, about James. Why would my recommendation carry weight?" I interrupted. "According to you, I'm just someone with a little hobby. Someone who deserved to be seated at the janitor's table at your wedding." The color drained from her face. "That was..." She started, then stopped. For once, Clara seemed at a loss for words. "A joke," I supplied. "That's what you called it at the time." "I was stressed with wedding planning," she offered weakly. "You know how bridezilla moments happen." "A bridezilla moment is snapping at your florist, Clara. Not deliberately humiliating someone you've known for 20 years." Her eyes darted around my office, taking in the evidence of my success. The awards on the shelf, the calendar filled with international commitments, the view of Soho from my window. "I made a mistake," she finally admitted, though the words seemed physically painful for her to say. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry." A year ago, those words would have meant everything to me. Now, they felt hollow, compelled by necessity rather than genuine remorse. "Thank you for the apology," I said, my voice neutral. "But that doesn't explain why you think I'd help you now." "Because that's who you are, Morgan." She reached across the desk, trying to take my hand, but I subtly shifted away. "You've always been the bigger person. The kind one. Remember when Jesse Wilson spread those rumors about me in 10th grade, and you defended me even though we'd fought the week before?" I did remember, just as I remembered every time I'd forgiven Clara's small cruelties over the years, making excuses for her behavior, believing in a friendship that apparently meant nothing to her. "We have history," she continued, sensing my hesitation. 20 years of friendship shouldn't end over one stupid mistake." "It wasn't one mistake, Clara," I said quietly. "It was a pattern. The wedding was just the first time I couldn't ignore it anymore." She sighed dramatically. "Fine. I wasn't always the best friend. I got caught up in status and appearances, but people change." She gestured at herself. "Look at me now. I'm practically starting over." "Because you have to," I pointed out. "Not because you chose to." Her facade cracked, just slightly. "Does it matter? I'm here, aren't I? Admitting I was wrong. Asking for your help." A note of bitterness crept into her voice. "Isn't this what you wanted? Me humbled and begging. I considered her question carefully. Was this what I'd wanted? Revenge had never been my conscious aim. I hadn't orchestrated Clara's downfall or sought ways to hurt her. Life, or karma, had handled that without my intervention. No, I said finally. This isn't what I wanted. I never wanted to see you suffer, Clara. Even after the wedding, I just wanted to move on with my life. Then help me, she pleaded. For old time's sake. I opened my desk drawer and removed something I'd kept all this time, the escort card from her wedding, with Janitor written beneath my name. I placed it on the desk between us. Clara stared at it, her expression a complex mixture of shame and resentment. I kept this, I said, not as a reminder to hate you, but as a reminder never to let anyone make me feel small again. I tapped the card. Do you have any idea what it felt like to see this? To realize that someone I trusted had gone out of their way to humiliate me on what should have been a happy occasion. It was Nathan's idea, she blurted out. He thought it would be funny. I raised an eyebrow. And you went along with it. I was trying to impress his friends, she said, her voice small. They all come from money, old connections. They wouldn't understand someone like you, someone creative and different. I was afraid they'd judge me for having a friend who wasn't. Who wasn't what, Clara? Rich enough? Socially connected enough? Brand name enough? You don't understand the pressure, she whispered. You're right. I don't understand choosing cruelty to impress people whose approval shouldn't matter. Tears welled in her eyes. Genuine ones this time. I made a terrible mistake, and now I'm paying for it. We've lost everything, Morgan. The money, the status, the friends, they all disappeared the moment Nathan's company tanked. No one returns my calls anymore. She looked up, vulnerability replacing calculation. Except you. You at least answered the door. For a moment, I felt a flicker of my old affection for her, the broken girl behind the polished exterior. Then I remembered her laughter as she'd explained the janitor joke at her wedding. I'll tell you what, Clara, I said, rising from my chair. I have a meeting with James next week about the foundation. I won't recommend you. That would compromise my professional integrity. But I'll mention that you're at Horizon and let him form his own opinion. It was less than she wanted, but more than she deserved. Relief washed over Clara's face. Thank you, Morgan. That's all I'm asking for, just a mention. I can take it from there. Her confidence flickered back to life, like a pilot light reigniting. I've always been good at making impressions in person. I almost smiled at her resilience. Even now, teetering on the edge of financial ruin, Clara believed in her ability to charm her way back to the top. My assistant will show you out, I said, pressing the intercom button. I really do need to get back to the installation. Clara stood, smoothing her rain-dampened skirt. Of course. I understand you're busy. She paused, then added with forced casualness, we should have dinner sometime. Catch up properly. Maybe, I replied, knowing it would never happen. After she left, I stared at the wedding escort card still on my desk. With deliberate finality, I dropped it into the trash can. Whatever power it had held over me was gone. The following week, I met James for our scheduled foundation meeting at his office. We discussed potential grant recipients, community outreach programs, and exhibition opportunities for emerging artists. Clara's name never came up. As we wrapped up, James leaned back in his chair. I saw in the visitor logs that Clara Whitmore Bennett came to see you last week. Nothing escaped his notice. She did. I acknowledged. Let me guess. She wanted you to put in a good word with me. I nodded, not surprised he'd figured it out. And what did you tell her? He asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. That I wouldn't compromise my professional integrity with a recommendation, but I'd mentioned she works at Horizon. He smiled slightly. Very diplomatic. And now you have. I suppose I have. For what it's worth, he said, shuffling some papers, her position is already under review. Not because of anything personal, the entire marketing department is being restructured for efficiency. I processed this information, feeling strangely hollow. Clara's fate wasn't in my hands after all. It was simply business, the impersonal machinery of corporate restructuring. I don't want to know the details, I said honestly. Whatever happens with Clara's job should be based on her work performance, not our history. James nodded approvingly. That's why I value your perspective, Morgan. You separate the personal from the professional. We moved on to other topics, and I left feeling lighter, as if I'd finally set down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for too long. 3 days later, I was in my studio working on a new piece when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It's Nathan. Need to talk. Clara told me you're friends with Richardson. Can you help with my legal situation? Willing to compensate you. I blocked the number without responding. That evening, I received an email from a real estate agent confirming my offer on a property had been accepted. Not Clara's penthouse. I decided against it. Instead, I'd chosen a brownstone in Brooklyn with a garden reminiscent of my childhood home in Connecticut. A place to build a future, not revisit the past. As I signed the digital paperwork, another email notification appeared, a news alert I'd set for Novatech, Nathan's company. Former Novatech CEO Nathan Bennett agrees to plea deal in fraud case, the headline read. The article detailed the terms, a hefty fine, probation, and community service in exchange for testimony against other executives. Clara's Instagram, dormant for months, suddenly showed activity the next day. A single post, a motivational quote about new beginnings against a sunset background, captioned, "Sometimes life takes unexpected turns. Excited to announce I'll be relocating to Chicago for an amazing new opportunity. Hashtag fresh start, hashtag new chapter." Elise texted me immediately. Did you see? Guess Richardson didn't keep her. Not my circus, not my monkeys, I replied. 2 weeks later, as I supervised the movers packing my art for the studio transition to my new home, I received a small package. Inside was a handwritten note and a check. Morgan, I'm writing to apologize once more before I leave New York. You were right, it wasn't one mistake, it was a pattern. I've had a lot of time to reflect on who I've been and who I want to be. The enclosed check repays the money you loaned me in college that I forgot about. With interest. I won't ask for forgiveness or friendship. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. But I wanted you to know that losing everything taught me what matters. I'm sorry it took that lesson for me to see what I did to you. Your success is well-deserved. It always was. Clara. I studied the check, surprised she even remembered that loan from 15 years ago. $5,000, money she probably needed desperately right now. After a moment's consideration, I tore it in half and dropped it in the recycling bin along with a note. I didn't need her money or her apology. I had already moved on. That evening, I walked through my half-empty apartment, remembering how devastated I'd felt leaving Clara's wedding a year ago. The humiliation, the betrayal, the end of a friendship I'd valued my entire life. Now, I felt only peace. Not because Clara had suffered, but because I had thrived. Not because I'd sought revenge, but because I'd chosen my own path forward. A notification pinged on my phone, my Paris gallery requesting approval for the final exhibition layout. I smiled, sending back my confirmation. Tomorrow, I would fly to France for the opening, then spend a month in Barcelona for an artist residency. My world had expanded beyond anything I could have imagined. And Clara? Clara was no longer a part of it. I had won, not by defeating her, but by refusing to let her define me. Not by seeking retribution, but by creating a life too full and meaningful to be haunted by old wounds. The best revenge wasn't served cold, after all. It was living well on my own terms, without looking back. I turned off the lights and closed the door on my old apartment and my old life for the last time.